My topic is ecological landscaping, how to take your home landscape and turn it into something that feeds the bees, the butterflies, and the birds, and to do so in a way that is low cost and low maintenance. I have a slideshow for you, and here's the order of the slideshow. I'm going to tell you a story about the Atala butterfly, and then I'm going to tell you a story about a Carolina chickadee. And then I'm going to show you a landscape that is unhelpful. I have some pictures from my home landscape, plants with insect visitors on them, including bees, but also caterpillars. And then I'm going to show you my plantings and how they illustrate how it can be low cost and low maintenance and ecological. And then I will show you how to do this step by step. Let's talk about the Atala butterfly. This is on the left is the Atala butterfly. On the top right is the caterpillar of the Atala butterfly, and on the bottom right is the Kunti plant. The Kunti plant is what the Atala butterfly caterpillar eats. This means that the Kunti plant is the host plant for the Atala butterfly. That the host plant in this case means that the caterpillar eats the host plant. The caterpillar can't eat just any plant. It's a specialist, just like most caterpillars are specialists. It can't eat just anything. It needs to eat the Kunti plant. Now, this is in South Florida. The Atala butterfly and the Kunti plant are indigenous to South Florida. Back before European settlement, the Seminole Indians knew that the Kunti plant had starchy roots. That way it could be used, you could eat it. So they taught the settlers to dig up the Kunti plant and eat the starchy roots. Fast forward to the 20th century, when the dry cleaning business came along and we started to starch our shirts on a large scale, and they harvested the Kunti plant for the starch that they could use in the dry cleaning industry. So they over harvested the Kunti plant. And then the Atala butterfly populations went way down because the Atala butterfly needs the Kunti plant, and if it doesn't have the Kunti plant, then it can't live. Then in the early 70s, the Endangered Species Act comes along, and they wanted to find the populations of the Atala butterfly were so low, they were thought to be extinct. They searched around to try to find the Atala butterfly, but they couldn't find any, so they couldn't get the Atala butterfly listed for purposes of considering it an endangered species under the Endangered Species Act. So they couldn't do anything to help it. Meanwhile, the landscaping industry decides, hey, the Kunti plant looks nice, so we're going to put the Kunti plant in people's landscapes. They did so, and then guess what reappeared? The Atala butterfly reappeared. The Atala butterfly is no longer thought to be extinct because here it is. And the moral of the story is that the Atala butterfly was saved quite by accident. So if we can save a butterfly by accident, think of what we could do if we intentionally put in our landscapes what the bees, butterflies, and birds need to eat. Next story is a chickadee, specifically a Carolina chickadee. The Carolina chickadee is this bird, photos courtesy of Doug Tallamy, and also the Kunti plant photos were courtesy of Doug Tallamy. But here's a Carolina chickadee. This Carolina chickadee has a caterpillar in its beak because that's what it eats, especially when it is foraging around in the spring when it has chicks. So the Carolina chickadee, raises its chicks, feeds it lots and lots of caterpillars. I want you to try to guess how many caterpillars the Carolina chickadee eats and feeds to its chicks during the 14 days in which the chicks are in the nest. So they lay the eggs hatch, the chicks are in the nest, and they're being fed caterpillars. And then after 14 days, they get kicked out of the nest, and they still eat some caterpillars, but just during that 14-day period, how many caterpillars do you think the Carolina chickadee feeds to its young? It comes back, it forages from 6 in the morning to 8 at night. It comes back to the nest every 3 minutes, and both the mother and father chickadee are coming back to the nest every 3 minutes. Sometimes it has only one caterpillar in its beak. Sometimes it has 2 or 3, as this one on the right. Every day, the total number of caterpillars involved here are 350 to 500 every single day for 14 days. The way the math works out, the pair of chickadees feeds their young between 6,000 and 9,000. So that's the number, 6,000 and 9,000. So to raise one clutch or nest of chickadee birds, it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars, and that's just one pair of one species of breeding birds. Imagine how many caterpillars are required on an acre or on a square mile if there are multiple species of multiple pairs of any one species and multiple species of breeding birds. So it's a lot. It's in the hundreds of thousands, if not a million or more, would be required on any given acre, and then a square mile is 640 acres. So we're talking about countless. We're talking about a million or more caterpillars are required on any square mile if you're going to have multiple pairs of breeding birds and multiple species of breeding birds. Now, let's talk about landscapes that are unhelpful. So if we want to support birds, we need lots and lots of caterpillars because birds need caterpillars. 96% of, let me click out of this for just a minute. 96% of terrestrial birds in North America need insects to complete their life cycle. Not terrestrial, meaning not water birds. And this according to Doug Tallamy, who professor of entomology at the University of Delaware. Doug Tallamy is famous in native plant circles because he's probably the single most visible advocate today for using our landscapes to support wildlife, especially caterpillars, because caterpillars are so important in the life cycle of birds. And birds are not the only thing that eat caterpillars. But the idea is that if you want wildlife in your landscape, if you want birds in your landscape, especially if you want breeding birds in your landscape, we need to plant the plants that feed the caterpillars that feed the birds. Remember, I showed you a picture of the coontie plant, and the coontie plant is the host plant for the Atala butterfly, insofar as the Atala butterfly caterpillar is food for birds and other predators. Then we need the coontie plant. in my region, oak plant, across the United States, oak trees are the #1 feeder of caterpillars. Maple trees rank high. Birch and willow rank high among, and cherry. Those are the top 5. Oak, birch, willow, cherry, and maple are the top 5 trees in my region that feed caterpillars. And I have a list of the top 100. Altogether in my county, there are 300 genera or genuses of plants that each feed at least one species of caterpillars. Some of them feed hundreds. The oak tree feeds close to 500 species of caterpillars just in my county, and it's very similar, over the eastern United States. And that's how you feed birds. So let's look at a landscape that is not very helpful in feeding birds because it does not have anything to feed the caterpillars. So here we go. This is a picture courtesy of Doug Tallamy. I see the photo is from Penny K. Stowe, but Doug Tallamy sent me his slideshows and said, feel free to use them. And so here's a picture of a landscape that doesn't have anything to feed. Here's just grass. It's grass and it's mowed close, and you have these bushes that are probably non-native. And now back here, you can feed caterpillars in these trees. That could be I don't know what kind of tree that is. It could be a maple. This looks like it could be a walnut or a hickory. And the trees back here feed caterpillars, but nothing in that landscape. Plus, this lawn is mowed close. When you mow close, it just deprives the landscape of water. You need vegetation in a landscape in order to have water in a landscape. All living things need water. So if you want to have living things in your landscape, you need the vegetation. And but if you don't want to have living things in your landscape, then mow it real close, and you can kill everything that's in the soil by using fertilizers such as Weed and Feed. I don't know if that's a brand, and I don't want to name any particular brand. I'm saying that insofar as a fertilizer has nitrogen fertilizer, and it has lots of these fertilizers have 2,4-D, which is a broadleaf herbicide. It's not, so the combination of the fertilizers and the herbicides are going to kill much of what is in any particular landscape. So this landscape is unhelpful. Let's talk about feeding insects. This is my backyard. This is a catalpa sphinx moth that is eating the leaves of a catalpa tree. On the left is multiple catalpa sphinx moth that are eating the leaves of that tree. Now you want some of your trees, in my opinion, we should want some of our leaves to be eaten, because if nothing is eating your garden or your landscape, then your landscape or your garden is not part of the ecosystem. So it's a catalpa tree with catalpa sphinx moth. On the top right is a burconid wasp, and on the bottom right is a caterpillar that was so what happened here is this burconid wasp stung the caterpillar, paralyzed it, and then laid its eggs inside the caterpillar. That way the eggs hatch and the larvae feed on the caterpillar. And that is just, that's how the burconid wasp survives. And if we allow the burconid wasp to survive and thrive, then it will control or limit the caterpillars in our landscape. It's good to have caterpillars, and it's good to have predators that control or limit the populations of caterpillars. This is a picture of probably a brown belt bumblebee on a purple coneflower. Here's a picture of a bee on a bee balm, Monarda fistulosa. Here's my Maximilian sunflowers. The yellow is the Maximilian sunflowers, and here's a bee on the Maximilian sunflower. This is the very first year for my pollinator garden. I mean, 2 growing seasons ago, this is the 3rd growing season for my pollinator garden. This is my first successful pollinator garden. Before that, I had one that utterly failed, and I would like to tell you why it utterly failed at some point. But I will show you later in this presentation how I did this and how it is, it's ecological and it's low cost and it's low maintenance. What you see here is some squash on the left. You have Maximilian sunflower. The purple is Eastern, or rather New England aster. And this plant looks like an ironweed right there. Or maybe, no, that's a white crownbeard. This is an abrupt digger bee digging into my evening primrose, pink evening primrose. It's a wonderfully ornamental plant, and it's native. This is another Maximilian sunflower with a bee on it. This is a mountain mint. Mountain mint this time of year is just crawling with pollinators. I can't wait. I have some mountain mint this year. Next year, I intend to greatly expand my mountain mint. I might be able to expand some this year, but it's the warm part of the year. It's hard to transplant this time of year. But this year or next year, I'm going to greatly expand the mountain mint because pollinators just love it. It is crawling with bees and butterflies. This is a American nursery web spider. Now, some spiders, we think of spiders having a web, and that's how they capture their prey. But the American nursery web spider captures its prey by jumping. Some spiders are salticid spiders. Salticid means it's a jumping spider, and it jumps and captures its prey that way. And this is on a purple coneflower, but Echinacea purpurea is this purple coneflower. Now, this is evidence of a leafcutter bee. Leafcutter bee, see how this right here is a natural part of a pin oak leaf. But over here, you have this hole right here, a hole right here, a hole right here. This is evidence of a leafcutter bee. The leafcutter bee, cuts the leaf and takes part of the leaf back to its nest. It curls up the leaf into a cone shape, and it puts pollen into the cone shape like this. Here's the leaf after it's furled up. It puts pollen down in the cone-shaped leaf, and then lays its eggs. And the eggs, when they hatch, are going to eat that pollen. Over on the left here, you have a jewelweed that shows evidence of a leafcutter bee. And on the bottom left, you have a maple leaf that shows evidence of being harvested in part by a leafcutter bee. Now, my plantings are dense and low maintenance. This is how I want to show you that everything you're looking at here is low cost and low maintenance. It's low. I think in 3 years, I've spent less than $200 on my garden, and I didn't even need to do that because the trees plant themselves, and the wildflowers, you just get them from friends. You get plugged into a network of people who you get plugged into your native plant society. If you're in Louisville or 50 other cities in the United States, you can get plugged into the chapter of Wild Ones, Native Plants, Natural Landscapes, of which I'm a co-founder of my Louisville chapter, and currently vice president of my local chapter. And that's how you get plantings that are low cost. And so let me show you how that works. This is my front yard. This picture here is from the third, this is a recent picture in my third season. Right here, you have on the left, if you can't see my cursor is probably too small. I forgot to make it bigger. But on the left, you see a common milkweed, and on the far left, you see a butterfly weed, which is also a species of milkweed. Milkweed is required for monarch butterflies. The milkweed is the host plant for monarch butterflies. If we don't have milkweed, we don't have monarchs, because the monarch butterfly depends on milkweed. There are many different species of milkweed, including the ones that I see the most are common milkweed here, and also a swamp milkweed are the three most common species that you see. The yellow flowers here are brown-eyed Susan. Over here on the left, you see a white snakeroot, which is going to have a beautiful white bloom in August. This plant is a cutleaf prairie dock. Behind it, you have the Monarda fistulosa, which is the lavender flower, also known as bee balm. And in the back, in the middle, you have goldenrod. Goldenrod ranks really high in terms of its ability to feed caterpillars and also many, many species of pollinators. Note that this is dense. I'm going to advocate that you make your planting dense. It's not going to be a plant here and a plant over here and a plant way over there. It's dense, and this means that we're shading out the weeds. This also means that there's a lot of biological diversity, so as to biological diversity is good. I mean, plant diversity is good for the soil. And then lots of diversity in one place means you're supporting a lot of different insect visitors. Plus, a lot of different plants in one place means that you're capturing a lot of rainfall. We want to capture rainfall so that, because everything needs water, and the more rainfall we capture, the more our landscape holds water without having to add water through irrigation or from a garden hose. This is looking out my back door. On the left, you have, see, this is a trail of wood chips. I'm going to show you about how to use wood chips as a primary strategy in creating a landscape that is low cost, low maintenance, and has lots of plant matter that tends to thrive on the water that you hold, because I do very little watering, and the way I can do very little watering is because the wood chips hold the moisture. I could name some of these plant species, and I will. Let's see. Got some Virginia creeper down here. Got some violets. There's some mountain mint in the back. We've got jewelweed here. We've got pokeweed up here. Got some pumpkins down there, and some evening primrose. And then over here on the right, there's Monarda fistulosa, bee balm in the front. And then behind that, you've got some brown-eyed Susans. Behind that, you've got some hibiscus. I grew the hibiscus from seed, and it's not terribly easy to grow things from seed. Growing things from seed is not terribly easy, and it's not terribly difficult. It's not terribly easy in that if you've never done it before, it's hard to just throw out seeds and have them do anything. They have a hard time competing with the grass. But I'm plugged into my native plants group, Wild Ones Louisville, and we had something called winter sowing, in which we got together in January and got milk jugs and potting soil and seeds, and we planted the seeds in the milk jugs, and then we set them outside, and then most of them sprout. You're not going to have 100% germination rate, but even if you do it poorly or in a mediocre fashion, you should have a 50 to 75% germination rate, and then you take those and transplant them. And that's how I did this hibiscus. So there we go. This is on the big plant in the bottom right is Biden's, I was going to say Biden's aristosa. Yeah, Biden's aristosa, also known as bearded beggar ticks. And I like plants that produce a lot of green matter. You know, I want to fill up my landscape with a lot of green matter because green matter is habitat. Green matter it absorbs water. Green matter means we're talking about plants, and plant roots are among the best things for the soil. So I like things like Biden's aristosa, bearded beggar ticks. I like the evening primrose, and I like yellow wing stem, verbicina, which are all, they're either prolific or they're big. So on the top right, top left here, we have pokeweed. It's big. I like things that are big because that means lots of green matter. That means lots of shade. That means lots of habitat. That means lots of water being soaked up. In the top middle here, I have an elderberry tree. And then back there, you see some brown-eyed Susans. Here, this is a picture from my first year. And I just got plants from friends. In the white is frost aster. The yellow is Maximilian sunflower, and the purple is New England aster. And then on the left here is squash. I like putting squash and pumpkins because the squash will find its way to the light. And it just kind of fills in the empty spaces and makes use of those empty spaces. Here's another picture of the same front yard from year before last. Maximilian sunflowers, New England aster, and white crownbeard and squash. Notice that this space is filled up with green matter. An ecological garden, in my view, in my opinion, using my approaches and methodologies and recommendations, an ecological garden is filled up with plant matter. The empty spaces that you see in my garden are where something hasn't had a chance to grow yet, or when I've taken something to transplant to somewhere else. But the ideal and the destination is to have it completely filled up with green matter, except for where I need to walk. And I can make little trails with wood chips and decide where I need to walk. Here's some goldenrod and some white snakeroot. Goldenrod ranks really high in its ability to feed caterpillars and also in its ability to feed specialist pollinators. About 21% of pollinators are specialists, and the idea is that if you feed the specialists, the generalists will take care of themselves. If you take care of the specialists, then the generalists will take care of themselves, because the generalists are, by definition, versatile. This is talking about pollinators, mainly bees. The generalists are by definition versatile, and they'll find what they need. So we try to take care of the specialists, and at some point I can share with you my list of the 15 plant genera that are good for specialist pollinators, and they include Cynthia trichum is asters, Helianthus is sunflowers, and things like that. Biden's is a genus that is good for specialist pollinators. And altogether, there are 15 genera of plants that feed specialist pollinators. Now, this is a recent picture of my front yard. I'm speaking in June, and in June, some things have bloomed. Most of the blooms come in August and September, but in the back here you have purple coneflower, which is Echinacea purpurea, one of my favorite plants. I don't have a good picture of purple coneflower here, but it produces a lot of blooms, and it blooms for a long time. It not only feeds pollinators, but it also feeds goldfinches, for one thing. It has a seed head that seed-eating birds like goldfinches like. And I don't think I would ever see a goldfinch in my garden if I didn't have purple coneflower. This also has milkweed, the host plant for monarch butterflies. It has, there's an ironweed on the top left, and there's some common, let me see, what am I trying to say? It's an evening primrose, a yellow evening primrose. And on the bottom right is an aster, which will be blooming nicely in September. On the bottom, you have common violets, which are a good host plant for fritillary butterflies, and they also make a good ground cover. Also, I've never planted a violet on purpose. They just come, they emerge, and if you put 6 or 8 inches or more of wood chips down there, then the violets grow up through the wood chips. It's a joy to see. And I will say that the goal of mulch, the goal of the wood chips, is not to completely eliminate everything underneath. We want some things underneath the wood chips to grow, because that means living plants, that means ground cover, that means green matter in your garden, and that means living roots in the ground. And there's nothing better for soil than living roots in the ground. We've been taught that plants take from the soil. Actually, plants contribute to the soil. So what are the steps in this process? Wood chips are a central component of, I'm going to click out of here, talk to you a little bit about wood chips. So wood chips are a central strategy in my recommendations. I suppose there's a way to do a pollinator garden without wood chips, but I don't know what it is. It's how I roll. It's what I recommend. And what I want you to do, if you're going to do this, is to get a whole entire load of wood chips from chipdrop.com. And the bottleneck or the limitation is, if you don't have a place for it, I don't know what to tell you. Have them dumped in your front yard or your backyard. Sometimes a truck can't get into somebody's backyard. Well, that's an issue. A truck would not be able to get into my front yard, but I have them come through the back alley, dump the chips. I'm on my 5th load of wood chips in 3 years in my residence at 3020 Greenwood. Down the street, I acquired a vacant lot, 3014 Greenwood. It's an 1/8 of an acre. It's entirely vacant. And I've only had it for, I've had it for about 6 weeks. I acquired it about 6 weeks ago. And so far, I've had them bring in 7 loads of wood chips. I've spread out most of them. And I'm just getting started. I'll probably have them bring in at least 2 or 3 more loads of wood chips this year. So, and this is 20 cubic yards at a time. It's a pile of wood chips that is about 5 or 6 feet high and about 10 feet wide. 8 to 10 feet wide, and so that's what I do. And the advantages of wood chips are They add fertility. Mainly they're mulch. So mulch by definition is something that gives you weed control. So wood chips are mulch for weed control. Wood chips are mulch for moisture control. And when I say mulch, wood chips are the only mulch I care to deal with. You can get mulch in bags at the big box store. I don't want to do that. It takes a lot of resources to make mulch that way. Plus, it doesn't contribute very much to my garden. It doesn't contribute very much to soil. So what do wood chips do for the soil? For one thing, they conserve the moisture. Good soil is a living organism, or at least a living ecosystem. All living things need water. Therefore, if you want your soil, good soil is an ecosystem of living things. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods are all microscopic things that are in the soil. Plus you get your earthworms involved, and your insects, your beetles, your ants. All of these living things plus plant roots go together to form an ecosystem to make healthy soil. I'm going to click on private chat to see if anybody thank you for the 7 people who are watching. Comments. Let's see if I can click on comment. Okay. Anyway, so where was I? Soil, the only thing worthy of there's dirt and then there's soil. The only thing worthy of the name soil is when it is living. It has lots of organic matter. It has lots of living organisms in it. The bacteria, the protozoa, the nematodes, the fungi, the earthworms go together to make good soil. And all of those things need water. Everything needs water. Think about how uncomfortable you feel when you're thirsty. And if you have enough thirst, it can cause serious health problems. It can cause, heat stroke and dehydration. If you have enough, so we need water. All living things, there's not a living thing that I'm aware of that does not need water. So the entire ecosystem under the soil needs water. Wood chips help hold water in the soil so that the whole soil ecosystem can function. The type of soil that is not very useful is compacted soil. Now, we think of compacted soil as being a result of foot traffic or people driving over it, etc. And that can cause soil to be compacted. But the main thing that causes soil to be compacted is kind of the death of the organic matter, the death of the soil organisms. And that way, good soil is 5% or more organic matter. Bad soil is like less than 1% organic matter. And so soil that has 4%, 5% or more organic matter in it is going to be spongy. And because it's spongy, it soaks up the rainfall and holds on to it in between rain events. If you want, so I'm just saying that compaction, the main reason for compaction is what we do to like tillage and chemical tillage, chemical fertilizers, herbicides are all bad for the soil, and they cause a decrease generally, especially if you do them consistently, massively on a large scale. The tillage, the chemical fertilizers, and the herbicides cause soil to become lifeless and compacted. So we want the wood chips. So I was going through the different the different benefits of wood chips. They hold in soil moisture. They control weeds. What else? They add fertility because the wood chips get a biological process going. They break down. Similarly, if you do composting and you put organic matter on the compost and periodically you mix it together, the reason it heats up is because you have biological processes going on, and those biological processes result in fertility. The biology that you get when you do compost is similar to the biology that you need and want in your soil. The compost, I was going to say it creates bacteria. It whatever bacteria is in there can grow. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, all these things are growing in the compost, and then you put the compost in the soil, and that's why compost makes good soil. Let's go back to the slideshow. Here's how to incorporate wood chips as a primary strategy for your garden. Go to the right screen here. Now, here are the steps for your pollinator garden. Here are the steps for a pollinator garden that is low cost, low maintenance, and ecological. Number one, get wood chips from chipdrop.com. Number two, spread out the wood chips in the area where you want to grow something. Number three, get native plants from friends, or you can buy them if you want to. There's some excellent vendors. There's Dropseed Nursery, Ironweed Nursery, there's Idlewild Butterfly Farm. I'm going to leave out some. My friend Lizzie Darling in Louisville has a new nursery. And there are lots of places where you can buy good native plants, but if you get plugged into a network, you can get them from friends. So number three, get native plants from friends. Number four, dig holes. Number five, put plants in holes. Number six, let things grow. Number seven, weed occasionally. So if you're a beginner, there's lots of questions you're going to have. But this is the broad outline, and the rest is details. I'm making it almost artificially simple here. I'm making it seem like a recipe because it is, but this is how it is done in my world. And I don't see why you would want to do it very much differently. If you don't have the wood chips, you're just asking for problems with weeds. You're asking for problems with drying out and having to water too much, and sometimes overwatering can cause soil compaction, which defeats the purpose because soil compaction deprives the plants of water. What have we got next? This is a full-size pile of wood chips from chipdrop.com. This was 20 cubic yards until I put a dent in it here, but this is a friend of mine who I helped her with. I said, get a load of wood chips from chipdrop.com. To her credit, she had them dumped in the front yard. You can't dump it in her backyard very easily. And then I carried several wheelbarrow loads full. Here's where we're spreading out the chips on the ground, 6 to 8 inches. 4 inches is not. 4 inches is okay. I prefer 6 inches or more. And then, we're going to plant in here. I'm not done with this job. I'm going to take the wheelbarrow and spread them over even more of the grass. And then, this is a flat spot right here in the upper right. And in the far upper right, there's a hill. The hill, it has a lot of rain coming down the hill. And we're going to have that rain intercepted by these wood chips and soaked into the ground instead of draining it off. The more rain we can get to soak into our landscape, the less is going to drain off. We want to keep that rain in our landscape. This is a recent planting. This is the vacant lot that I was telling you about. I brought in the wood chips. I spread them out. I moved the wood chips aside. I planted plants every 3 feet. These are mostly transplanted from my front yard and backyard. and it's grown a little bit since then. But this is, over the course of time, these plants are going to fill up this space, and if they don't fill up the space, I'm going to plant more plants in between. Like if what you see here is every 3 feet, and that's not enough to fill up the space, I'm going to put more in between, except for places where I need to walk. This middle aisle down here, I'll probably not plant in that aisle, but I will plant almost everywhere else, just leaving enough room to walk. And if you plant densely and let it grow, you end up with something like this. I have only, I have, the only place I don't plant anything is where I want to walk. The photo on the left is there's a whole trail of wood chips running up and down my backyard because I want to walk there. I want to walk there. I want to walk on the wood chips so that I don't get my shoes muddy, and so I'm not walking on plants. And wood chips are ideal for that. Wood chips are an ecological walkway. They make ecological trails that hold water from the rainfall so that it keeps the surrounding soil moist, and that keeps your plants with plant available water. So this has been a presentation on ecological landscaping. I'm just about done. I think I will maybe give you some thoughts, some words in the way of summary. But the goal here is to create a landscape that's ecological, that is low cost and low maintenance. And it's ecological because it feeds bees, butterflies, and birds. It feeds bees because there are flowers blooming. It feeds butterflies because butterflies are caterpillars are the larval form of butterflies. So the larval butterflies and moths are caterpillars, and they need to eat leaves. So you want to have the leaves that the caterpillars need to eat. And then when the caterpillar grows up, they're going to need to suck nectar out of blooms. So you need the blooms for the adult caterpillars, and you need leaves for the blooms for the adult caterpillars. You need blooms for the adult butterflies, and you need leaves for the caterpillars. And you want to fill up your landscape with as much of this as possible, because what else are you going to do with your landscape? Do you want your landscape to have a bunch of empty spaces in it? What's the point of that? That's an aesthetic that is formal. It is not my taste. It is not what I recommend ecologically. So I'm going to fill up my landscape with as much green matter as possible. You want plants, and you want plants covering as much of the ground as possible. You want plants in different sizes and shapes so they fill out as much of the three-dimensional space as possible. You want trees. You want tall trees, short trees. You want shrubs and bushes. You want herbaceous wildflowers. Herbaceous means leafy. That's the things that come back every year. So if I have an ironweed or a goldenrod or a milkweed, it's going to grow tall in the summer and then die off in the fall, and then it's going to start the whole process over again. So you have those leafy wildflowers. Some of them like the sun, some of them like the shade. You have the leafy wildflowers that fill up the space below the trees and beside the bushes. You also want vines. So that's one reason I have pumpkins and squash in here, because they are vines that fill up the space, because we're talking about having different plants that are different sizes, so there's as much leaf matter as possible, as much green matter as possible, filling up the spaces. And then you want the short plants that are ground cover, such as violets and Virginia creeper. My violets and my Virginia creeper are I've never planted either one of them. They grow wild and they just move in, and you put mulch on top of them and they rise up above the mulch. I don't want my mulch to kill everything. I want my mulch to let some things grow. And if it's something that I don't want, like winter creeper, then the mulch gives me an advantage over the winter creeper in that it's going to smother out and shade out as much of it as I want. And then when it grows up, I can pull it because there's not as much of it. And also because the mulch keeps the ground wet or moist, and it's much easier to pull a weed from ground that is wet or moist than ground that is dry and compacted. So ecological, low cost, low maintenance. I've spent very little on my garden because the wood chips are free. Did I tell you that part? Wood chips from chipdrop.com are free. And the wildflowers that I get from friends, because I'm plugged into a network, those are free as well. And so it's low cost and it's low maintenance because there's not much room for weeds to grow. What's most of the maintenance in a garden? Most of the maintenance in a garden is planting. It is weeding and watering. There's planting, that does take work. Spreading the mulch takes some work. Planting takes some work. But after the spreading the mulch and the planting, most of the work is weeding and watering. So the chip drops eliminate the most of the weeding and most of the watering. I water very little. That is by design. And one reason I water very little is because I want my landscape to be able to live without me. And, I want it to require a minimal amount of maintenance. I want my landscape to require almost no water. If I'm growing vegetables, that's one thing. If I'm growing vegetables, I'm going to water them a little bit. But wildflowers ought to be able to live on rain. Trees, wildflowers ought to be able to live on the rain. And the reason that, when you see people watering trees, in my view, the reason they have to water the tree is because the soil is bad, the soil is compacted, the soil is not able to absorb the rainfall, and therefore the tree needs water. Anyway, ecological, low cost, low maintenance. I hope this has been helpful. If you want to follow my work, if you're not already watching on YouTube, you search for Harthagen on YouTube at Harthagen23, and follow harthagen.substack.com. If you want to take my summer course called Healing Our Land and Our Climate, go to bioforclimate.org and look for me and the course called Healing Our Climate. Bio, the number 4, climate.org, and you can find my course there. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day.